Hi everyone, it's Michelle. Welcome back. So today I thought I would share with you again what I've been reading. I got a really good response to my first video sharing sort of all the books that I've been reading. It was really fun interacting with people in the comments and seeing you guys interact with each other in the comments. So I thought I would try to keep up with these videos, and I have read a few books since I made that video, so I thought I would come on and share them with you. I do like to talk about books relatively close to when I've read them, because then I still have sort of that feeling of kind of how I felt when I was reading the book, and I think that's sort of something that's really important to share. So let's jump in and get started with what I've been reading. So these are the books I have read since I made my last video. Not in the order I read them, but let's jump in and get started. The first one is short story, I would call it. This is a short story called An Attempt at Exhausting a Place in Paris. It's a very short 50, 60 page book by Georges Perec, who is a French writer, I believe. This is translated. So this is sort of an interesting way, or sort of an interesting sort of thought process on writing something. I will read you a blurb from the back because it does kind of describe what it is. So, one overcast weekend in October 1974, Georges Perec set out in a quest of the infraordinary, the humdrum, the non-event, the everyday. What happens, as he put it, when nothing happens? So, he chose a bench in Paris, at a very, very busy place in Paris, and he sat there and he really wrote down everything he saw over the weekend. And this is a book about that. So it was really hard to get into this for me, because there's a lot of, especially in the beginning, there's a lot of description, like what signs are there and what do the signs look like and what buildings are there, and you know, and then as people come by and have interactions that he witnesses, he talks about that. And then as a bus goes by, the number on the bus and where it's going and what it looks like. And it was really hard to get into this. Once you sort of got into it, it was better. I felt like I was there watching kind of what was going on, and I was like part of the process, part of the day. Just, I felt like another observer. But this book didn't, I don't know, it didn't influence me. It didn't sort of give me, I didn't feel anything when I read this book. So I don't know that I would recommend it. I think it might be hard to find this book anyway. I think I got this from an antiquarian bookshop that I go into occasionally, and the man who runs that shop knows that I'm kind of interested in, you know, different perspectives on Paris and reading about the French and all that stuff, and whenever he gets sort of a unique book, he will call me and tell me he has it. I think this is where this came from. I've had this a while. So I read it. I don't know that I would recommend it. I'm not sure you could even find it, but I'm glad I read it. But it was just kind of, I didn't feel anything when I read this, and that's not sort of what I'm looking for when I read a book. Okay, let's move on. The next book I read is called The 100-Year House, and this is by Rebecca Mackay. I'm not quite sure how you say her name, but this was a really, really good book. The front blurb says, a gleeful tale of ghosts, vengeance, and family secrets. So that kind of drew me in right away. I will read you a blurb about what the book is about. And again, I've said this before, I will be very, very careful not to give anything away or throw out any spoilers. So, meet the Devores. Z, a Marxist literary scholar who lives with her husband, an out-of-work academic, in the carriage house at Laurelfield, her family's historic estate, which this book is written about Laurelfield, which is an estate, I don't know if it's a real estate, but it's an estate outside of Chicago. So this book, the setting is local to me. Gracie, her mother, who claims she can tell your lot in life by looking at your teeth, and Violet, Z's grandmother, who they say took her own life somewhere in the vast house, and whose portrait still hangs in the dining room, terrifying guests. When Z's husband begins to look into the history of the estate and the artist's colony it once housed, he discovers much more than he bargained for. The first in a long line of secrets at the heart of this seemingly genteel, if very odd, family. So I really liked this. I don't know that This book is written in 3 time periods. So you start in sort of modern day and sort of what's going on. It's like the current time period, and there's events that happen, and you learn about the people, and there's some questions that aren't quite answered, and then it jumps back in time to like the 50s, and it talks again about this estate and what's going on at the estate, and then there's some characters that you heard about in the last time period, and now you get to learn a little bit more about them because now they're here, and it answers some more questions but creates some questions, and then it jumps back again into, I think it's the 20s, the late 20s, and then you learn about sort of some of the characters that you read about in the midsection, and it was really well written, and I liked how it didn't jump back and forth in time. It just jumped back in time, and then it jumped back in time again. I really liked how it was written. It still left you guessing. It was a little bit suspenseful. You kind of wanted to know what happened, and then when you learned more about what happened, it wasn't what you thought it was going to be. So it was all really sort of well thought out. There's a blurb in here from the New York Times Book Review that says, equal parts screwball comedy, intellectual sex farce, historical drama, and old-fashioned ghost story. The 100-Year House sometimes feels like a precocious love child of John Irving's The Hotel, New Hampshire, and a rousing game of Clue. It really was a good book to read. I liked it. I don't know if I would call this a ghost story, but there is a ghost story here. That's what I will say. So I really like this. I would highly recommend this. I would give this book 3.5 stars. I'm a hard judge when it comes to stars, so 3.5 stars is a very good rating for me. I would recommend people read this. Another book that I read was My Name is Lucy Barton by Elizabeth Strout. This is a new book. Yes, this is a new book. This again was a very quick read for me. This is more of a character study about Lucy Barton. Although there is a little bit of a story here and things you want to learn about her, but it's more of a character study. I will read you the blurb about the book. This is by Elizabeth Strout, who has written a couple other books. I will say that. She is a Pulitzer Prize winner. She wrote Olive Kitteridge and The Burgess Boys. I have not read either of those, so I couldn't speak to those or her writing. This was my first book of hers that I read. So here it is. Lucy Barton is recovering slowly from what should have been a simple operation. Her mother, to whom she hasn't spoken for many years, comes to see her. Gentle gossip about people from Lucy's childhood in Illinois seems to reconnect them, but just below the surface lie the tension and longing that have informed every aspect of Lucy's life. Her escape from her troubled family, her desire to become a writer, her marriage, her love for her 2 daughters. Knitting this powerful narrative together is the brilliant storytelling voice of Lucy herself, keenly observant, deeply human, and truly unforgettable. So this is, written in the first person. It is Lucy talking. And again, it was a really quick read for me. I had a hard time with this book, not reading it. I read it very quickly, but I don't like Lucy. So, and this is about her. It's about her and her relationship with her mom and some other things in her life. She hasn't seen her mom in 9 years, and she's in the hospital, and her husband isn't coming to see her, but her mom comes to see her, after 9 years, and she's there for a few days, and it's kind of about their interactions and stuff. But the reason I had a hard time with this book is because I couldn't connect with Lucy, because while Lucy has achieved the things in her life that I think some of which she's wanted to do, she's kind of a wuss. She constantly needs to be validated, and she's constantly talking about trying to validate herself and the things that she says, and then she tries to prove them to you with her words. I didn't like Lucy, so that made this book hard for me, and I think part of that is she's so needy. And I like books about women who are very driven and are looking to prove themselves. And she was so wimpy and so needy. Sometimes I just wanted to slap her and say, come on, stick up for yourself here. So it's an interesting character study, but because I didn't like her, I don't know about this book. Yeah, and this book did leave some unanswered questions because, you know, Lucy couldn't get answers to her questions because she's such a wimp. So it was an interesting story. I don't know. I would give this 2.5 to 3 stars. That would be where I would rate it. It wouldn't be something I would want to read again. I would say it's very well written. It's very well written, and it's a quick read, but I didn't like her personally. I did want to say the reason I purchased this book was, so I got this book from the Book of the Month Club. I belong to the Book of the Month Club, which is a subscription service, and just like it sounds, you get 1 book a month from the Book of the Month Club. What I like about the service is that on the 1st of the month, you get an email to come pick your book, and there's a group of books that are selected by a panel of judges. Some of the judges are celebrities, some of them are authors, some of them are people in the publishing industry, and they all write a little blurb about the book they think you should read that month. And you go through the blurbs and you pick the book and then they send it to you. And so it exposes you to some things that, you know, some books that maybe you wouldn't have chosen or you wouldn't have seen or you wouldn't have thought about. That's why I really like it. So that's why I ended up purchasing this book. And then when you get the book, you get a little, you know, note from, not personalized or handwritten, believe me, from your judge. So the person who selected this book was Lee Haber, who works for Oprah Magazine. And she writes, "Dear readers, you may be familiar with the work of Elizabeth Strout from her past novels, especially Olive Kitteridge. If so, you know that her writing is a spare, elegant, and powerful. In her new book, My Name is Lucy Barton, the strained relationship between a mother and daughter is explored, and wow, does this story cut close to the bone. I hope you love it." So it's nice to get this little blurb about sort of why, you know, why they think you should read it, that kind of thing. So I do enjoy being part of this book club. And then if you get to the book selection process, and there's quite a few books to choose from, and you can't pick just one, every additional book I think is, or you can get 2 more for $9 each or $10 each or something like that. So it has been good for me because it's exposed me to books that I might not have picked. And you usually get a bookmark with a quote from someone in it, a bookish quote, and this month said, "Outside of a dog, a book is a man's best friend. Inside of a dog, it's too dark to read." And Groucho Marx said that. So you usually get something cute like that. Okay, lastly, let's get to lastly, and my favorite book that I read, so this time, was a Neil Gaiman novel. So I finally got to read my first Neil Gaiman novel, and this book is The Ocean at the End of the Lane. This book is, I would call it magical realism. I think it's technically defined as fantasy. It's very light fantasy if it's considered fantasy, in my opinion. So I will read you what this book is about. First I'll just say, Neil Gaiman is a very famous author. He writes a lot of children's books. He's written some adult novels as well. This is considered one of his adult novels, I believe. And he's done graphic novels, and I think he was pretty famous for a comic book series, I think. Anyway, and he is married to Amanda Palmer, who has written her own book, but I think she's also more known for, she's a rock and roll star person. Anyway, let me tell you what the book is about. So, a middle-aged man returns to his childhood home. First of all, let me say the front of this book. So one of the reasons, a lot of people recommended that I read Neil Gaiman, and so I was trying to pick a book. And this one, the front of the book says, "A novel about truths, some wonderful, some terrible, that children know and adults do not." So that kind of drew me in right there, right? Let's see, what do children know and adults do not? So, a middle-aged man returns to his childhood home to attend a funeral. Although the house he lived in is long gone, he is drawn to the farm at the end of the road, where, when he was 7, he encountered a most remarkable girl, Letty Hempstock, and her mother and her grandmother. He hasn't thought of Letty in decades, and yet as he sits by the pond, a pond that she'd claimed was an ocean, behind the ramshackle old farmhouse where she once lived, the unremembered past comes flooding back, and it is a past too strange, too frightening, too dangerous to have happened to anyone, let alone a small boy. So this book was fantastic. It's very well written. Right from the beginning, the story grabbed me, and I was curious about the characters in the book. You know, our main character, you know, it's told from when he was a 7-year-old boy. I cared about him right away. I read this book very, very quickly. It's less than 200 pages. They're not small pages, but I read this book in, you know, like one night and part of the next day. It was so good. I needed to know what happened. I needed the question answered. I needed to know what was going to happen. And so this sucked me right in. His writing is really, really easy to read, and it's very descriptive and very well done. This would make, I don't know how they would do it, but gosh, if they could make this in a movie, if it was a well done movie, it would be so great. So I highly recommend this book. I would give this book, you know, this is a book I will keep because it was so well written. And I will say that first of all, I don't really keep my books. The only books I really keep are books that I might reference again. I don't have like shelves and shelves full of books. I just think books need to be passed on to someone else to read them. Books are meant to be read, not left on a shelf. So I don't typically keep my books. This is a book I will keep. I will loan it out to people to read, but I will want it back. I will also say that since I have read this book, I have tried to start a couple of other novels that I have, and I just can't get into them. And I think to myself, why did I ever buy that? So this book and his writing has really sort of changed what I'm looking for in my reading for now, which is a very powerful thing. I loved it. I highly recommend this. Yeah. And then after I read the book, I went on YouTube and searched for him, and there are many videos of him speaking of this book, which I will say is another tip for you. If you like read a book and you really love it, you know, go on YouTube and see if there's any YouTube videos of the author talking about the book, because it's always very, very interesting. I never do it before I read the book because I'm so afraid of a spoiler, and I don't want anything spoiled before I read a book. But it was very interesting to hear him talk about this as well and answer some book club questions and stuff like that. I loved this book. I loved it. I can't say enough good things about it. I highly recommend it. And you know, some people said once you read a Neil Gaiman novel, you have to read all his novels. And so I definitely will purchase more of his novels. I do have one on my shelf. I have a short story collection of his on my shelf that I have to read, but I will definitely in the future purchase more to read. I'm trying not to buy any books right now because I have quite a selection of to-be-read books sitting on my shelf right now. And I do belong to a couple book clubs where I get, you know, a couple books every month. So I'm trying to go through my back stock of books. I'm not going to force a read just to do it, but there will be more Neil Gaiman in the future for sure for me. Loved it. And again, I would call this more magical realism because it's very real world. There are, you know, the Hemstocks are an interesting group of characters that, you know, maybe bring the fantasy into it, but I loved it. I can't say enough good things about it. So that's what I've been reading. Please share with us in the comments what you've been reading. Also, if you've read any of these books, tell us what your thoughts are. Please be very careful not to have any spoilers in there. I don't like, you know, I don't want people who are reading the comments to, you know, for anyone to be spoiled. It really breaks my heart when someone spoils a book for me, when someone's describing a book to me and then they let something slip, which may change how I read the book or feel about the book. So I try not to do that. So that's what I've been reading. That is it for today. I hope everybody has a fantastic day, and I will talk to you all again soon.